Hello and thank you for joining me today on The Political Conversationalist. My name is Ben Phipps and we're still talking about divisive issues. Today we're talking about immigration, how it works, and potential reforms for it. And before I go into pros and cons of things, I wanted to give a outline of how people actually can become legal citizens and how that whole process works. So let's go ahead and get on with that. Most people who come to this country, especially through Mexico, be they from Central America or South America, are seeking refugee or asylee status. So I'm going to outline how that works first. A person seeking refugee status is still in another country, and they need to contact the UN Refugee Service, or they need to contact the U.S. Embassy and apply for refugee status through them. Then it's kind of out of their hands. Now, a person seeking asylee status has already come to this country, and there are certain places they can apply for asylee status in different cities, major cities. They can apply for asylee status if they are facing political, religious, sexual orientation, discrimination, whatever it be that may make it unsafe for them to return to their home country. And then they could be granted asylee status. So that's how they go through that process. The important part of that process that makes it different from what's going on at the border now is that they're not going to border crossing agents and at border crossing stations and saying we're seeking asylum. They're just sneaking across, and when they get caught, they're saying, well, we want asylum. That's not the proper way to do it. They would be supposed to go to one of the designated crossing stations and ask for asylum from the Border Patrol agents there. They will also be fingerprinted, have their background checked, and will have an interview with a U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services officer. And once that interview determines whether or not the situation in their home country warrants them being a refugee or an asylee, they will be either granted that status or not. But there's more. So normally that takes about 2 months, 60 days roughly, to go from filing for asylee or refugee status to getting a final decision, be it yes or no. But there is more to do. We've all heard of a green card, which is technically called a permanent residence card. And normally if you have refugee or asylee status, those are temporary reasons to be in the country. And I believe in the government's mindset, you're planning on returning home when whatever situation brought you here dies down. So there's a year period between being granted asylee or refugee status before you can apply for a green card. And you don't actually apply for your own green card. Either your employer or a family member does. Green card being a permanent residence card that allows you to work and will keep you from being deported unless you commit a major crime of some sort. So when someone files an immigrant petition for you or sponsors you, if it is approved, then you can file for a green card yourself. They will fingerprint you again, take your photos and your signature. There's another interview to make sure you are eligible for a green card, and then you will receive a final decision. With a green card, you are a legal resident and you can find employment. Obviously, that's the most important part of the green card for most people. I know some people who have come here on the waiting period for a green card, and then they can't work and they have to sit at home, and it's illegal for them to work under the table. So it's kind of a catch-22 there. You can't make money and survive, but you also can't go get a job. It's a bad situation. Now, you have to keep your green card for 5 years before you will be allowed to apply for naturalization by filing that form. Naturalization is the process by which non-citizens become citizens. And there's a, let's see, after you apply for it, if your application goes through and everything seems well with that, you'll have an interview and kind of a test with a U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services officer. You'll be judged on your ability to speak, read, and write English, as well as a brief test. There's 100 questions officially on the test of U.S. civics and government and history. And out of those 100 questions, they pick 10. You have to get at least 6 right. It's not too terribly difficult. If you fail any portion of the test, you can retake between 60 and 90 days without refiling. But keep in mind, though, that applying for naturalization, the actual application fee is $725 just to file the form with the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. So if all that goes smoothly, you pass all your tests, all your applications go well, you don't have any background, any prior, everything is well, everything is good, then after $725 and 6 to 7 years, you can become a citizen of the United States. And that's a best case scenario. So if there's any kind of issue with your background check, maybe your government's not cooperating with our government on releasing documents and information, then of course that will make everything more complicated. Many people find it necessary to hire an immigration attorney, and we know attorneys are also very expensive. But some people aren't satisfied with the way this is done. A lot of people will say that, we need stricter immigration, we need tougher immigration laws, we need to let fewer immigrants into the country. And they point out mainly the economic burden that is caused by immigrants, or that seems to be caused by immigrants. They say that the more immigrants are in the country, the fewer jobs there are for Americans. Another way immigration burdens the economy is that immigrants can use welfare systems. Now, first off, illegal immigrants cannot use any welfare benefits, but people who are refugees or asylees or green card holders can use welfare and benefits. And the reason is, from what I read, that they are to benefit from the same thing as regular citizens, because once they are able to work with the green card, they can also pay taxes, or they're required to pay taxes. And once they are granted asylee, refugee, or green card status, they are eligible to be drafted in a time of war. So therefore, they're allowed many of the same rights and privileges of official U.S. citizens. A lot of people also point out that we have plenty of people in America. We have a little of everything in America, and we don't need any more people in America. That's actually a common theme, especially if you look around on the internet and try to see, why we need stricter immigration. That's normally how I do things. I Google the question and I research the answers, and there are just many people who think we have plenty of citizens in America and there's no reason to bring more people here at all. Now, a lot of other people will say immigration needs to be easier. Many people argue for a path to citizenship. The 11 million illegal immigrants that are here, most of them say things like, if their only crime is wanting to be an American, then let them be an American. Many point out that we are a nation of immigrants in America. We are the melting pot of the world. Except for Native Americans, we were all immigrants, and according to a lot of anthropological history, Native Americans originally originated from the Mongolia area and came over when there was a land bridge between Alaska and Russia. So even then, everyone is an immigrant. I mean, we all believe that the origin of life is somewhere in the Middle East, so everyone's an immigrant unless you're living in the Middle East. But most proponents of easier immigration use more emotional arguments than people who argue for stricter immigration. Especially, we can see this with the border separations, where the children are being held in separate facilities from the parents, saying that's inhumane, that's cruel, that's against human rights, because we're taking children from their parents and we're doing this, that, and the third. And a lot of people will just say it's absolutely fine the way it is, just enforce the laws you got, stop being so ornery and bureaucratic about it, and everything will be fine. Now, I do have a lot of thoughts on immigration. I work at Eaton Corporation in Kings Mountain, where we make transmissions. I drive a forklift, and I talk to a great many people. There's a lot of people out there who are immigrants. I've spoken to immigrants from Colombia, from Laos, Thailand, and Niger, I believe, is I think that's all of them. May have been one from Vietnam. I'm not 100% sure. But I've spoken with immigrants, and I've spoken with a couple of them about the immigration process and what they think about it. And many of them say it is very difficult, especially now after 9/11 in the early 90s, all the way through up until 2001. It was fairly easy to become a citizen of the U.S., However, after that, we became a lot more skeptical of who we let into the U.S., and with good reason. But I spoke with some people who say, it's difficult for older people to immigrate because it's hard for them to learn English sufficiently to qualify to immigrate. So there are a lot of little rules and things that end up cutting people off and refusing them to become U.S. citizens. One other thing I want to say just about the refugees and asylees and the naturalized citizens, there are like numerical limits on how many people we will grant refugee status in a year. Say there's a numerical limit from 800,000 people. We'll say, okay, well, we want 200,000 from Southeast Asia and 400,000 from the Middle East, and the remainder of them can be split between Europe and South America. It's broken up geographically like that, and I find that very odd. The same thing goes for people seeking asylum, and the same thing goes for, in some cases, green card holders, and we only typically allow 1 million new naturalized citizens a year. So thought that was an interesting thing to point out. But I have some thoughts that I believe are tempered by practicality and not so much tainted by partisanship. It would be literally impossible and extremely expensive to try to track down, capture, and deport every single illegal immigrant in America. However, allowing them to continue to live here illegally and flaunt our laws is disrespectful to the U.S., and in my opinion, it's even more disrespectful to the people who spent the time, the money, the effort, went through all the rigmarole, cut through all the red tape, and went through all the work to become a legal citizen, like my boss, for example, who is from Niger, or like my friend who's from Laos. They had to do a lot of work to become legal citizens of America, and allowing people to just live here and not punishing them for not going through the work is disrespectful to the people who did put in all the work. My proposal is pretty simple. Those illegally in the country would have 6 months to file for refugee asylee status if eligible, with no legal repercussions for being here illegally in the first place. This would also go for people whose visas or green cards have expired. During that 6-month process, no one would be deported and no one would be prosecuted for being here illegally. I suppose an exception would be people would be deported who had already been convicted of crimes. But after those 6 months have passed, those who have not applied or reapplied would need to be deported, because we gave them a grace period, we gave them plenty of time. 6 months is plenty of time to take a day out of your life and go file some paperwork at the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. I think we should keep the numerical cap on refugees and asylees, but I think we should remove the geographical boundaries of that, because it's very hard for us in the beginning of the fiscal year to think, well, we believe that this country will have more refugees than this country, and the political climate and worldwide climate, the way war works and everything changes on a day-to-day basis, especially in these highly advanced technological times. So it would be best just to allow a numerical cap and not to worry about so much where they come from, unless, like, for example, with Trump's executive order banning Syrian refugees, that we ban a specific country or something like that, but otherwise have no strict cap on who we allow in from where. I think we should also make a clear definition between people who are seeking refugee or asylee status temporarily and are going to return home within a year, and those who come here seeking refugee and asylee status initially but are wanting to stay here permanently. For instance, we have many people at the border now from Venezuela who are they're seeking asylum up here. They're coming up and seeking asylum, but I don't think every single one of those people seeking asylum plans to go back to Venezuela. So it would be very, very good if we could distinguish between those seeking temporary asylum and planning on going back, and those who want to continue to stay here, and fast track them for a green card. And the reason I would like to fast track them for a green card is because without a green card they can't work, and without working they can't pay taxes, and therefore they're not a productive member of society, as many of them honestly want to be. So we should definitely lower the wait period between asylee and refugee status and getting a green card. And I believe we can keep the 5-year waiting period on the green card. I don't see anything wrong with that. From getting your green card to getting your citizenship, I don't see anything wrong with that at all. But I did look into something else a little more along these lines about temporary work visas. The U.S. granted, I believe it was 600,000 temporary work visas in 2012. And you know, I'm not cool with that. And the reason I don't like that, I don't agree with that, is that these people are from foreign countries and they're coming in here and they're benefiting by working for Americans, taking that money and taking it right back to their foreign country. Maybe they're paying taxes, maybe they're not. But I think we should definitely focus on the people who are choosing to be Americans rather than the people who are choosing to make money while in America and return home. Same thing with the asylees and the refugees. The people who are seeking safety, okay, we will provide them safety, but the people who are seeking citizenship, we should put them on a quick path to it. We'll talk about the wall in another video I have planned, and we don't have many more of these divisive issues coming up because I haven't had many suggestions from you guys. I have from a couple of you, and I appreciate it. But if you have any suggestions on something that people just love to argue about and you'd like me to analyze, I would appreciate if you left that down in the comments. If it's something long or you don't want to publicly put your name out there, you can always follow the link in the description to my Facebook page, and there'll be a button there you can email me from. And if you email me from there, it's completely confidential. I won't tell anybody who you are unless you say I can, and I will hit you back as soon as I possibly can. Thanks.